Lesson 1.2 Integers. Integers include positive and negative numbers. They are rational numbers and can be written as a fraction with the denominator 1. When we compare two integers, for example, -7 and -5, the number to the left, in this case -7, is always less than the number on the right. When we compare -1 to -5, we see that -5 is to the left of -1. So -5 is less than -1. We can also say that -1 is greater than -5. So when we use this sign, we put a lesser, smaller number on the left. This is the greater number. And if we use this sign, the smaller number goes here and the greater number goes to this side. To order integers in increasing order means to start with the smallest number, so the most negative number. In this case, it's -9, and list the numbers from smallest to the largest. We start with -9, then -5, -1, 0, 2, 3, 7, and 9. Let's compare integers using signs greater than, less than, and equal. 5 is less than 9. And B, -4 is less negative than -5. So -4 is greater than -5. And C, -5 is more negative, so it's less than -4. Pause the video and complete practice 1. Then check your answers. Let's order the following integers in increasing order. We start with the smallest number, the most negative number, -10. Next, it's -7. -2, 0, 3, 4, 7, and 8. Always check that you used all the numbers. In science, we learn that everything, all the matter, is made of small particles called atoms. Atoms are made of positive protons. These are found inside the center, the nucleus, and negative electrons, which are located outside the nucleus. Since atoms are neutral, the numbers of protons and electrons must be the same. +1 and 1 negative equals to 0. For example, a sodium atom has 11 protons inside the nucleus and 11 electrons outside the nucleus. But what happens if we remove an electron, the negative charge? We will still have 11 protons inside the nucleus, but now we will only have 10 electrons. That means that we have one more positive charge compared to negative charges. This will give us an overall charge of positive 1. Neutral fluorine will have 9 protons and 9 electrons. So the overall charge of a neutral fluorine atom is 0. Each plus cancels 1 minus. But what if we add an additional electron? We still have 9 protons, but now we have 10 electrons. So we have an extra negative charge. So the overall charge will now be negative 1. Let's look at adding two negative integers. Negative 2 plus negative 5. We will represent each negative number with red circle. So here we have negative 2 and we're adding negative 5. We see that altogether we have negative 7. So adding two negative integers gives a larger negative sum. So just like 2 plus 5 gives us 7, negative 2 plus negative 5 gives negative 7. So if you have $2 and you get 5 more dollars, you will have $7 altogether. However, if you owe $2 and you borrow 5 more, you will owe $7. To show the addition on the number line, we start with negative 2 and then we add 5 units to the left because it's a negative number. So 5 units to the left, we end up with negative 7. Let's practice. Negative 3 plus negative 5 is negative 8. When we get to bigger numbers, it takes too much time to draw all the little minuses. So negative 3 plus negative 15. If it was positive 3 plus 15, that would be 18. But if both numbers are negative, we're adding two negative numbers, the result is negative. Let's try one more. We start with negative 15 and then we remove or we add 5 more negative signs. So altogether it's negative 20. Again, 15 plus 5 is 20. Since we're adding two negative numbers, the result is negative. And 35 plus 35 is 70. So negative 35 plus negative 35 is negative 70. Now pause the video and continue with the practice. Now check your answers. Practice 4. A scuba diver is 50 meters below sea level. What does it mean if she is below sea level? So if this is sea level at 0, below sea level is negative value. So she's negative 50 meters. She then decides to swim 20 meters lower. She goes 20 meters deeper. Because it's lower or deeper, that's minus 20. How far below sea level is she going to be? We need an equation. We start with negative 50 meters and then she swims 20 meters lower. So we can either add negative 20 meters. We could also subtract 20 meters. You will see that adding a negative integer or subtracting that integer is the same. Negative 50 meters plus negative 20 meters is negative 70 meters. I do prefer using this rather than subtracting 20 meters. So she will be 70 meters below sea level. When adding positive and negative integers, we must remember that positive 1 plus negative 1 will always equal to 0. You see once again that 1 plus negative 1, so 1 plus negative 1 is the same as 1 minus 1. So 1 plus negative 1, they cancel each other out. What about 1 minus 1? We start with a positive 1. Minus 1 means we remove it. Both cases give us 0. Let's look at the example 2 plus negative 5, which is the same as 2 minus 5. 2 plus negative 5, we start with 2 positives, and then we add 5 negative signs. Remember that plus 1 and negative 1 cancels out. Positive 1, negative 1 cancels out. And we are left with 3 negative. Negative 3. I much prefer having 2 plus negative 5 rather than 2 minus 5. We can represent it easily with the diagram like this. But what about representing 2 minus 5 with a similar diagram? So let's say we want to represent 2 minus 5 using the positive and negative signs. We start with positive 2. But how do we remove 5? We're going to use a little trick. We're going to add a 0. A 0 is positive 1 and a negative 1. Notice that we added positive and negative, so we still have 2 only, because plus and minus gives us 0. It cancels out. We still cannot remove 5 because we only have 3 pluses. So let's add another 0. Now we have 4 pluses, 2 minuses. Let's add one more 0, 1 plus, 1 minus. Since we kept adding zeros, our value is still 2. Now we have 5 pluses, so we can remove 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We are left with negative 3. So this is just another way to show 2 minus 5, which is the same as 2 plus negative 5. I still find adding a negative number much easier than subtracting a positive. If you'd rather use a number line, we start with 2. If we want to add negative 5 or subtract 5, we're going to move 5 units to the left. This will give us negative 3. Practice 5. 20 plus negative 5. To add a negative number is the same as subtracting the positive number. In this case, since our positive number is larger, it is easier to say 20 minus 5 is equal to 15. You could also see that we have 20 positive signs and only 5 negative. So 20 minus 5 is 15. The larger number is positive, so the result is positive. Let's look at C. Now we have 5 and negative 20. In this case, the negative integer is larger than the positive. We have 20 negative signs and only 5 positive. So our answer must be negative because we owe more than we have. 20 minus 5 is 15. So when adding a positive and negative integer, you can simply figure out which integer has a larger value, positive or negative. This will determine the sign and then simply subtract the integers. So we have negative 13 and positive 15. We see that 15 is larger than 13. So positive is larger than negative. The answer is positive. 15 minus 13 is positive 2. Now pause the video and complete practice 5. And check your answers. The coldest temperature ever recorded in Canada was in Snag, Yukon. It was 108 degrees Celsius lower than the hottest temperature recorded. The hottest temperature recorded was 45 degrees Celsius in Yellowgrass, Saskatchewan. What was the temperature recorded in Snag? So the hottest temperature recorded was positive 45 degrees Celsius. The coldest was 108 degrees Celsius lower. So we have to subtract 108 degrees Celsius. We start with 45 degrees Celsius and we either add negative 108, which is the change, the drop in temperature, or we subtract 108. I prefer to add the negative. So we have negative 108 and positive 45. The answer must be negative. Now we subtract 108 minus 45. The difference is 63 degrees Celsius. So the coldest temperature ever recorded in Canada is negative 63 degrees Celsius. Subtracting a positive integer is now very simple because it is the same as adding a negative integer. And we already learned how to do that. Notice that when we subtract a positive integer, we don't write minus positive 5. We just write 2 minus 5. And we know that 5 is positive. Again, it is much simpler to show the addition of a negative integer. So we start with positive 2 and we add negative 5. Then to show the subtraction of a positive integer. Remember that to do that, we would have to include the zeros. So to represent subtraction 2 minus 5, we would have to use 3 zeros so we can remove 5 positive signs. The result is the same, negative 3. Using the number line, we again start with 5 to subtract 5. So we start with 2 and to subtract 5, we move 5 units to the left. So what I would recommend when subtracting a positive number is to change subtraction to addition of the negative number. So we have negative 3 plus negative 5, that is negative 8. And negative 100 minus 100 is negative 100 plus negative 100, which is negative 200. The exception is case like C, where we can simply subtract 5 from 35. 35 minus 5 is 30. Now pause the video and complete practice 7. And now check your answers. Practice 8. The temperature of water in a pot is 78 degrees Celsius. How much hotter does the water need to be to start boiling? Remember, the boiling point of water is 100 degrees Celsius. So we have water at 78 degrees Celsius. We want it to boil at 100. So how much do we have to increase the temperature for the water to start boiling? So we have our initial temperature, T1. We have our final temperature, the temperature we want to reach. Let's call it T2. And we have to find how much we want to change the temperature. We can use a little triangle to represent change. Change in temperature is represented as a triangle and capital T. So we're looking for the change in temperature, or we're looking for the difference in temperature between T2 and T1. Remember, difference is the result of subtraction. So to find the difference in temperature, how much we have to increase the temperature, we can take the final temperature and subtract the temperature that we start with. So T2 minus T1, that's 100 minus 78 degrees Celsius. So we need to increase the temperature by 22 degrees Celsius. Notice that the sign is positive because we have to increase the temperature. That means that the equation makes sense. When subtracting a negative integer, we add that integer as a positive integer. So how can we explain that subtracting a negative integer is the same as adding the positive of that integer? There are two explanations. One, we know that there is really -1 in front of those brackets. So what that means is we have -1 times -5, and negative times negative becomes positive. But we still didn't get to multiplication and division. So how can we explain it in a different way? So we start with two positives, but there is no negatives to subtract it from. So let's add those zeros. Remember, the 0 is a positive and a negative, so that's a 0. We can always add a 0 because it doesn't change our result. So let's add 1 0. We still cannot remove -5. So let's add 4 more zeros. We added 5 zeros, so we still have only 2, right? Because we start with 2. This is 0, 0, 0, 0, and 0. So all this really represents our 2. Now we have to remove -5. -1, -1, -1, minus -1, sorry, minus -1. So we removed -5, and we're left with +7. This is just another way to show why 2 minus a -5 is the same as 2 plus 5. And when adding 5 on the number line, so 2 plus 5, we move 5 units to the right. So what I would do every time I see minus and negative, I would right away change it to positive. 4 plus 5 is 9. Negative 95 plus 5. So negative is larger than positive. So the solution answer is negative. 95 minus 5 is 90. And it makes it really easy in examples like C, where you have 5 plus 5, which is 10. Remember, if you have two integers and one is negative and the other is positive, you see that which one is bigger, larger. So negative 10 has a larger value. The answer is negative. And then you subtract the two. 10 minus 5 is 5. And if you're still having trouble, draw the negative 10 and then draw the positive 5 to find the answer, negative 5. Now pause the video and complete practice 9. Now check your answers. Kiki has $12. She needs $27 to buy a book that she likes. How much more money does she need to save? So she has $12, but she needs 27. So we need to find how much she needs to save. We can also use a different diagram. So she needs $27. She already has 12. So X represents the amount of money she needs to save. So 12 plus X equals 27. But we can also say that 27 minus 12 is the amount that she needs to save, our X. So she needs to save $15. And we will continue with addition and subtraction of integers in the next video.